Hi guys, this is Zach from Watches on You, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Rolex 1675 GMT Master. Now you heard that right. This is a GMT Master, not a GMT Master 2. So this is the second generation of GMT Master, the reference 1675. And what makes this different from a GMT Master 2, other than the writing on the dial, because the early GMT Master 2s look extremely similar to these GMT Masters, is the functioning of the movement. So the GMT Master 2 has an independently settable hour hand versus this does not. And what that means is you could set the main hour hand independently from the GMT hand. This merely displays the same time as the hour hand on the 24-hour scale for its GMT hand. So what this allows you to do is only be able to adjust for one extra time zone versus on the GMT Master 2, you can actually get 2 extra time zones. So the way this works is to get your second time zone, you actually just use the bezel. So you rotate this bezel. So right now it's the GMT hand is saying it's roughly 9 o'clock on your second time zone, which is really just the same as the main time zone because this is at 12. But I can move this so that the GMTN is pointing at the time of the new time zone, which in this now we're saying it's 13 or 1 o'clock in the new time zone. So that's how you will be able to change to get an extra 1 time zone out of this watch. On the GMT Master 2, what you can do is by setting the main hour hand differently from the GMT, you'll have a time on the main hour hand. Then you'll have a different time on this 24-hour hand, and you can get a third different time by rotating the bezel. So what you could say is this is pointing at 9 o'clock in your second time zone, if it's different from the main hour hand. And then you can rotate the bezel so, based on the hour markers, it's still showing 9 o'clock, but it's showing 12 o'clock in your third time zone. So sorry if that's a little complicated. I hope I was able to explain that at least as coherently as possible. But let me know actually in the comments if you have any more questions about how this works. I'd be happy to go into more detail. But that's really the difference between the GMT Master and the GMT Master 2. So obviously the GMT Master 2 is going to be more useful than the GMT Master, and that's why they don't make the GMT Master anymore. But at this time, there's actually an overlap period where they made both of them, the GMT Master obviously being cheaper. So, well, going into this watch, I actually really like the vintage GMT Master. It's a lot more trimmed down, obviously, from the modern ones. Personally, I think the modern, just Rolex, mainly any Rolex sports watch now with a bezel, mainly, a ceramic bezel. So the dive watches and then the GMTs, they're a little too over the top, in my opinion. I don't know. They're a lot more loud than they used to be, obviously, just looking at this vintage one. Which I think is good. It has its place. Obviously, Rolex is a statement brand now. Everyone knows it. It's probably one of the most recognized brands in the world. Definitely the most recognized luxury brand in the world. And so I think if you're trying to make a statement, obviously the modern ones are going to be good. But I really liked the kind of toned down nature of the vintage ones. And I really like how it just kind of tells the story of how this brand that everyone knows as making the best timepieces, and I mean, we all know, since you guys are watching watch reviews, you probably know Rolex isn't the best of the watchmakers when it comes to finishing and everything, but they're definitely the most iconic. So it really kind of shows you where they came from, and it's a lot more humble beginnings than you might expect. So this watch comes in at 40 millimeters, which is the same size as the new GMT Masters. I think that's the perfect size. I think 40 millimeters is great. 40 millimeters is perfect for kind of an everyday or sports watch. And then I like 38 for a dressier timepiece. But this size is great. I think it will match basically anyone's wrist. And I think you'll be able to wear it with pretty much everything. I love the Pepsi bezel on this watch. I really like these old aluminum bezels. The colors are just so much more vibrant than on the new ceramic ones, especially for the Pepsi. The red is kind of washed out and more of a pink on the new ones versus this is a bright cherry red and then a bright blue. I really much prefer the aluminum bezels. And to be honest, I was almost hoping that Rolex brought it back on the latest Pepsi, but I didn't get that wish. And I understand why they're sticking with ceramic, but I just think the colors look much better on these aluminum bezels. And then on the dial, you have a matte dial with there's no applied indices. They are all painted lume indices, which I think looks very nice. I like the clean nature of these old matte dials. I think they're absolutely beautiful. And I think that the painted lume with the nice patina that it gets over time, because it is tritium lume, is excellent. Now, that means that it's not going to work because it's tritium lume, and by now all of these watches will have their lume totally, their lume won't be active anymore. I just love the look of this watch with the nice patina, and this one has an extremely clean dial that just is absolutely stunning. And also the hands have the same lume, which it just gives the dial such warmth, especially the matte dial as well, that is not matched by the new glossy dial Rolexes. In addition, you're going to have a Hesselite crystal actually on this, or well, it's an acrylic crystal. So it is not going to be a sapphire, which means it's going to be a lot more prone to scratching. But it also means you can polish out the scratches if they're very minor. You can even just use toothpaste to polish scratches out of acrylic because it is a form of plastic. So deeper scratches are going to stay there and you'll need to replace it. But again, that also means it's really, really cheap to replace relative to ceramic. Ceramic, it's going to be at least a few $100s. Acrylic, you're going to be talking tens of dollars. It's really cheap just because it's plastic. There's not much that goes into making it from a technical standpoint. And I also think it provides the dial with even more warmth. I like the way acrylic looks personally. But if you're going to be using this watch as more of a sports watch, you might want to get something with sapphire because that will stand up to a lot more abuse than this will. Even though acrylic is actually more resistant to shattering. It's mainly the scratching that will be your issue. You can see it has the standard Rolex polished sides and then brushed tops of the lugs as far as the case goes. This one is also going to have nice polished bezel as well. It is a smooth bezel. So on these GMT Masters, they didn't click. The new ones click every half hour. These ones do not click at all, which, again, I don't think is a big deal for me. There's a good amount of tension on the bezel, so it's not just going to turn when you don't want it to for the most part. So I kind of like it. And the case is finished. This one has been refinished by Rolex Rolex Servicing. So it's not the original finish, obviously, and it's really rare to find watches of this age that are the original finish, but it's done by Rolex and it's very high quality. And I like how these cases have a lot thinner and longer lugs than the modern Rolexes. Rolex did kind of fix this almost on the new Submariner. The new Submariner, they increased its size and made the lugs a little thinner. Which I think makes it look a lot better than the especially in the square lugs that it used to have, where it was almost rectangles sticking off of it. I think that this wears very nice, and you'll see when I do a wrist shot of this watch, you'll see how nice it looks on the wrist. The bracelet, you have the Rolex Classic Oyster bracelet. This is not going to be a solid link bracelet, however. The side links will be solid, and the centers, you can see there, are hollow, which is same for all Rolexes at this time, and frankly, almost all watches at this time. Same with the end links as this as well. However, some people actually prefer these end links on these bracelets because, as you can see, they do not protrude past the case at all. This is compared to when Rolex switched to the solid end link design. For example, on this Sea Dweller here, where you can see it sticks out past the case a little bit because they took out this small little link right here and just replaced it with a longer solid piece on the end link. Now, some people prefer it this way. I personally prefer it the other way, but if you have a small wrist, you're going to like this a lot because it will better conform to the size of your wrist. Now, as far as the clasp goes, it is not the Oyster, or it is an Oyster clasp, but it's not the Submariner style of clasp where it has the safety latch. This is just a standard push on and then pop off. Very easy to use. It's definitely not of the quality as the modern Rolexes. Modern Rolex bracelets are absolutely fantastic. I personally think they're the best on the market. I love how they feel. So this is going to be quite a step down for that, but it gets the job done just fine. So now let's go into a wrist shot. So on the wrist, this 40 millimeter size looks great. I have about a 7.5-inch wrist, so take that for reference. But I think this really will fit almost everyone, especially again that solid end link. You can see, or the hollow end link. You can see it will really fold in. So if you have a smaller wrist, this will conform to your wrist very nicely. I would say this watch wears though, however, more like almost a 42 millimeter. The dial is quite large relative to the bezel thickness, which I think increases the size of the watch from a visual standpoint. From a comfort standpoint, however, it will wear like a 40, as that is the true measurement of this watch. Clasp is very nice. The bracelet, there's really no problems with the bracelet. It's just it doesn't feel quite as nice as the modern ones, but there's no hair pulling or anything. This design has lasted and been used by many other manufacturers, even, or variations of this have been used by other manufacturers for a reason. It's really tried and true, and it's very comfortable and will stand up to really whatever you throw at it. So this watch comes in pre-owned at a price of $15,000. It's being sold at Continental Diamond in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. They gave us this watch for the purpose of this review. The link in the description is to their website if you'd like to inquire about purchasing this. But I think that these Pepsis are really nice, and they've absolutely shot up in value recently over the past few years. But, I mean, you can see why. They're really very unique, very iconic. I mean, the people who have worn this, I'm not even going to go into naming them because there are so many famous people that have worn the Pepsi GMTs. I just really love it. And also you get the story of this behind this watch, as this was actually designed for Pan American Airlines because the pilots wanted a watch that could track multiple time zones. So they made them this, and then it has the Pepsi as that kind of matches their colors. So there's so many stories behind these watches, and there's really nothing like them again. And I don't think you'd have to worry about the value dropping on these. Steel Sports Rolexes have been, I mean, past decades, yes, they've shot up a lot recently, a lot more than they usually do. But even looking in the past, there's really never been a point in which they dropped for a significant period of time. They've always really held their value very, very well. So again, thank you guys for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and let me know what you think about this watch in the comments. Thank you.